for the invocation, please. Almighty God, we just give you great thanks and great praise for allowing us to be here tonight. We thank you for your hand being on our city. May we always be a light where people will know that we represent you here. We ask your blessing on this meeting tonight, that you would guide and direct us. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please remain standing for the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You be seated. Okay, as a reminder, we do have an executive session tonight. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, sir, there are not.
Okay, you've all received the minutes from our last meeting, and if there are no questions or comments, I'll accept the motion to receive the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Councilman Holland seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, to start us off tonight, we have Mrs. Merritt's going to come up and introduce a couple of new employees.
Good evening.
Good
Evening.
All right.
They've been instructed.
Stand back over this way. Sorry, stand right here. All right, so we have two new employees in the administrative department. And Kiana Vessels, she started on August 1st. She grew up in the Seaford area, went to school here. We're happy to have her. And then we also have Erin Niblett. She started on the 22nd of August. And again, she grew up in the area, went to school here. So we're happy to have both of them working for us and providing services for our customers.
Thank you so much for being here.
I would like to shoot together. Walk the line.
And next we'll have Mr. Bailey come up and introduce Mr. Shockley.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's Brent Shockley. He was hired in August as the part-time code inspector. He's been in the Seaford area for quite some time. Previously worked for Sussex Conservation District as their inspector. So he's going to take over doing most of the rental license inspections and other inspections as we need them.
Welcome, Mr. Shockley.
Congratulations, buddy. Glad to have you.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Yes, sir.
Mayor?
We need to get the girls to go down a little bit.
Always great to welcome new employees. Okay, do we have anyone here tonight for public comment? Mr. Cannon, will you come up to the mic, please?
Now, before I start, I just wanted to respectfully request that if there are responses to what I have to say by anyone, and I would request that there be extra time allotted for me to respond to those comments. Beyond that, first I'd like to address what I call unnecessary idling. The car and truck industry has been getting smarter for quite a long time by increasing fuel economy, decreasing exhaust emissions, improving safety features, and more. A little noticed but expanding element to increase fuel economy and decrease exhaust emissions is an engine stop-start feature in place of wasteful idling. Recent increases in vehicle traffic, particularly trucks around Seaford, have led me to consider advocating for a modified engine stop-start regime. While not a recommendation for all vehicles, nor for regular stops at stoplights, stop signs, etc., a stop-start requirement is my strong recommendation for those vehicles which are stopped and left running for no apparently good reason. Such unnecessary idling hurts fuel mileage while increasing air and noise pollution for everyone. Stop-start is a habit which can be formed through repetition when given the proper incentives. For instance, USPS carriers have used stop-start for as long as I can remember, and just think about the number of stops that they must make to deliver the mail. Of course, there should be exceptions, perishables needing temperature maintenance, weather extremes necessitating heating or cooling for occupants, etc. Nevertheless, let's create a local ordinance which prohibits extended more than 30 seconds of idling within the city limits of Seaford. Less noise, less pollution, better fuel mileage. What's not to like? And other unnecessary things, which I call unnecessary disclosures. Non-disclosure or secrecy by governments or government officials is a real problem for us citizens. It makes us uncomfortable, nervous, worried. Seaford has amply demonstrated an unfortunate habit of hiding public information, which needs to be corrected. Therefore, I'd like to ask Mayor and City Council if they will now identify the secret donor who offered to fund Seaford's legal defense of its illegal fetal remains ordinance and alleviate serious doubt about the integrity of those who continue to withhold the donor's identity. And I'd like you also to recall that on 6/29/22 of this year, the Delaware Court of Chancery rendered decisions against the city of Seaford, including, quote, "the state prevailed and is therefore entitled to an award of costs," unquote. Rather than hiding them, will Mayor and City Council now agree to release the yet undisclosed details of that agreement with the DOJ to the public? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else here for public comment? Okay. Do we have any correspondence?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, we'll go to new business number 1. We'll invite up Mr. Sims to walk through the power cost adjustment clause.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I know typically we only have to update the PCAC every calendar year along with the DMEC forecast and their fiscal year. We're kind of in an unprecedented situation this time around to where the Indian River coal-fired facility, they did everything according to the book. They had told PJM that they were going to decommission one of their units over a year ago, before June 1st of 2021, to request a June 1st, 2022 decommissioning date. And PJM said that the unit had to remain active and available for dispatch until such time that there were significant transmission upgrades made to the Delmarva Power Zone system. And they believe that those upgrades are essentially 5 years away at this point. And so the fact that they are allowed to run for reliability, or required to run for reliability purposes by PJM, they submitted a filing into FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to essentially request make-whole revenues that would allow them, essentially it needs to subsidize the operation of the plant in order for it to run, because the reason for the decommissioning is it was going to be decommissioned for economics. It's just the regulations behind getting those coal-fired facilities, particularly of that age, to meet the emission standards of today cost a significant amount of money. And so it's not just the city of Seaford, and it's not just the DMEC members, it's the entirety of the Delmarva Power Transmission Zone. So we are paying a relatively smaller percentage of it, but still it's a significant increase nonetheless in terms of cost to run that facility. And so this is the first time that DMEC has required essentially a middle of the year increase in the DMEC rate, which has always been steady from January 1 to December 31 every year. So I don't expect this to occur often, and there is essentially a tail end of 5 years on this increase. So once the transmission upgrades are made within the zone, the cost should come back down. But unfortunately, our hands are tied, and everybody that's in the Delmarva zone are facing these. So everybody's rates have gone up as a consequence of this. DMEC has been, even though those increases started on June 1st of 2022, DMEC has been paying out of some reserve funds to cover those increase in costs up to this point. So, there's been some mitigation, I guess, against what the increase would have been had it have been increased back in June. The other reason for the delay is that it's almost impossible to determine. Oh, so do you have a question?
I do. Before you get too far down the line, I'm interested in, so they're going to capitalize over 5 years these transmission upgrades. How are those costs going to be passed on?
So the transmission costs get collected through a transmission enhancement charge that's on the PJM invoice, which is separate from the this reliability must run requirement. These revenues are going directly to Indian River in order to subsidize the plant so that it can economically operate.
So what concerns me is that PJM will start putting these extra costs in as they go as over the next 5 years, because they're putting out capital and they want to recover that, so that would be additional costs on top of this cost, potentially.
That is right.
Okay.
And Delmarva Power is required to file with the FERC a revenue requirement on an annual basis. And so once those transmission upgrades are built and completed, then Delmarva Power will request from FERC an increase in their transmission rates. So essentially it would go from being what is currently today under the transmission enhancement charge, which is basically spread amongst the entirety of PJM. So it's not just the Delmarva Power zone. And so yes, those costs will then be concentrated to just the Delmarva Power utilities. And so it's hard to say. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what the cost of the specific transmission upgrade is.
I have some of those.
Okay.
So just for reference, there's some solutions that have been presented. So one solution is to rebuild the Viona-Nelsona line to increase the size of the line. The estimated cost of that is $38.5 million. The in-service date is 12/31/26. So by contrast, there's some other projects. There's 6 other projects that have been identified by Delmarva totaling $8 million. And their in-service date is listed here as 12/31/22. So they're pretty quick. But when you look at the minimum Delmarva zone impacts, okay, so here's some monthly charges that we are all subject to. $5.8 million per month, which calculates to $69.6 million a year. Or over this 4.5-year process, it's $313.2 million to keep this place running to offset a $38.5 million transmission enhancement. So you're going right to the heart of this issue. This should have been better managed, and this relatively small 1/10 of a transmission cost should have been implemented prior to this getting to this point, to where we have to spend 10 times, the ratepayers have to spend 10 times that. But,
So I have a couple of questions too. Sure. So I'm looking at you talked about how it was divided up and spread out across the entire operating area. How does it compare? How does our increase compare to everyone else? I mean, is it an equal division, or some people paying more, some people paying less? What does the equation, what does that look like?
So in terms of the DMAC members, it's equal, because the DMAC charges the same rate for every municipality. And so the increase in cost on a percentage basis is essentially identical amongst all the DMAC members. Now, there are,
Even though some may use more power than other, it's still
that's
even-
correct.
even Steven.
That's correct. Their wholesale rate is going from $74 and it's on page.
But Councilman, if you want to talk about absolute dollar impact, Mr. Sims is absolutely correct. DMEC, the proposal, and what we did was we raised the wholesale rate. But some examples, the city of Seaford for 12 months is estimated to be $586,000. So if you look at Lewis, it'll be, for that same period, about $451,000. So Lewis and Seaford's load is about the same. But if you look at the town of Middletown, that same 12 months will be over $1.4 million. So what that shows you is the size of their system, the number of meters they have. But on a per meter basis or a per megawatt hour basis, that wholesale rate is the same. It's just the larger systems are going to pay the bulk of this. Does that answer?
It does, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and to that, and I also wanted to mention sort of at the end, but we could touch on it now since it's relevant. So the DEC, the Delaware Electric Cooperative, their rates for the first time since I've been keeping track of a rate comparison between the city of Seaford's rate and their rates, they're actually more expensive than ours now. So their rates have gone, their PCA actually doubled. It went from 23 mils up to 46 mils. And so that is equivalent to a $24 increase in the residential customer's bill. So the increase that we're talking about today for Seaford is a 9 mil increase. So it's about $9 on a 1,000 kilowatt hour bill for a residential customer. It's about 6% increase. And so, you know, that's one of the, I just wanted to highlight, that's one of the benefits to DMEC. So they purchase their power well in advance of the actual time that you need to use the energy. And so some of their contracts go out to 2025, 2026, where they've already set a certain price on what we would purchase the energy for. And so sort of separate from the Indian River, the actual cost of power it doubled essentially back in August of 2021. It went from roughly about $30 a megawatt hour up to $60 a megawatt hour in August of 2021. And it then went up another $30 a megawatt hour in July of this year.
Right.
And so this is, again, separate from Indian River, but the fuel cost essentially has made its way all the way to the energy market. And so those utilities that are not hedged significant years out into the future are essentially paying today's prices as opposed to the long-term prices that were at a much lower level when DMEC locked those in. So there likely is going to be a time when those contracts run out, our costs are going to take another step up, but that's going to be getting us essentially to the level playing field of where Delmarva Power and DEC are today.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I guess my second question is kind of follow up on what Councilman Henderson alluded to. As we continue to move forward and upgrades continue to happen, if that cost is implemented back to the consumer for X amount of years, what steps are taken? What can we do? Maybe alternative energy sources or power or something, instead of always coming back and hitting the consumer with this upgrade. So over the next 5 years, if costs continue to go up, upgrades continue to go up, and that cost of doing business continues to be implemented back into the consumer, I mean, the cost of energy is just going to continue to rise. So is there anything we can do proactively to kind of head that off? Is there any kind of solutions or anything that you recommend so we can kind of
Yeah, I mean, at the city level, unfortunately, no. But the fact that these filings all go in front of FERC, and DMEC did intervene, it's called intervening, essentially, on behalf of all of the DMEC members, they were there at the table when they were determining this increase in cost, essentially, like what is appropriate to keep Indian River going. And so DMEC does represent you guys at those discussions because they can't, Delmarva Power can't just install as many transmission lines as they want. They have to be approved.
Sure. And
that approval process, DMEC is extremely involved with to keep those costs as low as possible.
Sure. And if they don't have the money set aside in the reserves to do those projects, then all they're gonna do is just continue to send the cost back out to the consumer.
Well, I think what gets at the heart of what you're getting to, Councilman King, is the distributed energy market, solar, wind, and all that, has not matured to the point in this state or in this country where it can take the place of specifically natural gas generation. And that's basically probably 90% of what our electric generation in this country is. So you can almost watch that commodity price on natural gas, and if it goes up, you can pretty much say my electric rate's going to go up. So we don't have enough of the solar and the wind to backfill and replace all the electricity we're consuming. In the short term, we can challenge the filing that FERC has rules. We can do that as a group, but the mass deployment of these new technologies is just not there to fill that gap. So unfortunately, our customers, they're stuck paying this price. There's just not enough projects to be able to do this at this point.
Yeah. Thank you.
And additionally to that, there is one thing that we could do, and that would be to encourage DMEC to consider going to, instead of a fixed per kilowatt hour charge for everybody, if they were to charge each municipality based on its actual contribution, we really call it direct assignment. It'd be like a direct assignment of transmission cost. Then it would be possible for the city to reduce its transmission obligation. I say that because what's happening at the very base level is the transmission peak is they take the Delmarva Power Zone's highest single day usage throughout the year, and if that occurs, whether it's a winter peak, so it's a really cold day in January or a really hot day in July, whatever the case may be, that single highest day, they take a look at what each individual utility's load is during that exact same day and hour, okay? And whatever your load is during that time, that determines what you pay in terms of your transmission cost. So if the city were able to reduce its transmission peak, like if you had a peak rebate program,
Right.
whatever you wanted to call
So
it,
you reduce that
you could
cost.
encourage
Yeah.
customers, that's right, you could reduce that cost. However, that today only reduces the cost on your PJM bill.
Okay.
We don't pay that PJM bill directly because DMEC pays it directly, and then we pay DMEC a per kilowatt hour rate. So theoretically, even though it's not possible,
Right.
if we were to reduce our transmission obligation to zero, like we could go out there and shut off the switch, and if we timed it right, we could set our transmission costs essentially to zero on the PJM bill, but since DMEC averages out the cost and charges a per kilowatt hour rate for everybody, we would essentially be giving our benefit to all the other DMEC members.
Yeah.
So one way around that would be, and they have been considering essentially more of a direct assignment of cost. I
Well,
mean,
not being facetious, it's like, everyone's kind of managed the same, right? To your point, so you're taking the highest peak and you're dividing it out and you're distributing it across the board. So if some people are trying to do better than others, at this point, everybody's kind of held to the same standard. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, but that would, obviously would introduce more volatility in the rate,
See,
not that it's
that's the key.
necessarily,
Yeah.
It's
right.
based on your load profile.
Right.
And so we have some, when we're in the group, we have some smoothing of that load profile. So as our city grows, as our load changes, those dynamics, we could be on the other side of that to where
Sure.
it costs more. So,
Yeah.
we try to look at everything and be as measured as we can so we don't harm anybody with the rates. Sure.
Councilman McCoy, did you have a question?
It's more of a comment. I heard a term from the city manager about mismanagement, and I can hear the voice of residents saying, why are we having to pay for mismanagement? And so this topic of conversation irritates me a little bit because I feel like our residents are paying the price for the mismanagement. I think messaging is clear on this, or it's important to be clear about it, is that I can only speak for myself, but I'm not happy about this, and that the city has options to fight this moving forward.
you want to continue with what you have, or are you at the end?
Well,
We
I
kinda
mean,
went
we
off
sort
on
of, we sort of jumped around and hit
Yeah.
the main pieces, but essentially to, like I said, in order to cover this increase in the DMEC cost, and the increase is going to be effective with the next DMEC bill that goes out, and so that'll be right around October 10th, and that's for the usage during September. And so that's why it's important to act on this quickly. That way it'll be done, it'll be effective with the next meter readings for the customers, and it'll be in sync with when the cost increases actually come through on the wholesale bill.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So what happens if we don't do this, right? Let's say we don't implement this increase. What happens? What does that look like? What happens then?
Yeah, so what would happen is the PCAC would undercollect by about $75,000 a month, okay? And since the ordinance requires that you not over or under collect by more than 3% of annual power supply costs, it would only take a couple months that it would be under collected by so much that by ordinance, technically, we would be required to then increase the PCAC. We're just being proactive, so rather than doing it would take a much larger increase then, because then we would have to collect for the several months that we didn't increase it. You know, I don't think there's a way around the ordinance. I mean, what would physically happen then is that eats into the operating budget, because we're not collecting our power supply costs appropriately, and so we have to pay that DMEC bill. That's unavoidable, because if you don't pay it, then you're essentially in default, and PJM they can kick you out essentially for that. Right. So the fact that we have to pay that first, it's going to have to come somewhere else in the operating budget, and at the tune of $75,000 a month.
$75,000 a month based on this increase. $75,000 a month.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we all agree, no one likes to pass along rate increases to our residents, and unfortunately, this was handled, and again, there's a lot of political stuff going on with this and everything, so, but we do need to deal with it as a city. So with that, if there are no further questions, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to apply the re-levelized power cost adjustment clause, PCAC of .00300 per kilowatt hour, to be effective for the billing in October for September consumption as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Councilman Santos. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote on this. Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you for walking us through this. I know it's
Yeah, thank you.
tricky. Appreciate it. All right, next we're going to call up Mr. Mears to a revision in the water and sewer rates. Good evening.
So, I made a recommendation to change some water rates for out-of-town city users. We only have a couple, but moving forward, there's some things in the works where potentially we can get some more users being part of the whole Sussex County sewer district and everything. So currently how we're doing it is we're charging a third of the city property tax rate. So we come up with a tax rate for them, and then we charge them a third of the tax rate. So I felt like this was an outdated methodology. So I feel like they should be charged for the consumption, not based on a tax rate. So I propose to set a rate of 1.5 times the current water and sewer utility rate. I looked at a couple other municipalities, and that's in line with kind of what they're doing. So I started there. You guys can pick any rate you would like, but that is what I'm proposing.
Mr. Mears, so the public understands what you're talking about, these are residents that do not live within our city limits. They are not connected to the city of Seaford Electric, but they are receiving water and sewer.
Yep. Could be
Okay.
water and sewer, could be just sewer,
Okay.
could be just water.
So, all right, just want to make sure we're clear about who we're speaking of.
Yep.
Okay, are there questions from City Council for Mr. Beers?
Second one.
Yes, sir.
Hey, bro, this is more leaning towards residential or commercial.
It's gonna do both.
It's gonna do both. All right.
Okay, question, other question?
Yeah.
Councilman Santos?
How many properties do you think would affect?
I knew you were gonna ask me that, and I have a spreadsheet on my desk, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I wanna say it's 9 or
I was gonna say 8, but
9, somewhere in that range.
it's, under 10, we think.
Yeah.
But it's the 10 now, but it's really where this could go in the future is.
That's the main thing, yes.
Right.
And at least one of them is relatively large.
Yep.
It's an industrial facility down near the Invista plant that we serve water to.
Right. Other questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Director of Public Works to amend the water and sewer rate charged to customers that are served outside of the municipal boundaries. Note, if approved, municipal code changes will be presented to City Council in October, and the change would become effective in January of 2023.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman King. Is there a second?
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King? Aye. Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Mears. All right, next we're going to do the bid for the generator for the fire department. Mr. Mears, you're going to walk us through this?
Yep, well, that's kind of why I stayed here. So
figured.
we received 2 bids, thankfully, for the replacement of the generator at the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department. We've been putting away money in the budget for quite a few years for that now. So we did receive 2. I made a recommendation. So what we needed, we had a base bid to replace the generator, and then there was also an alternative number 1, which was to provide alternate power, a portable generator during construction, during switchover, because there's going to need some work to be done. In the bid specs, it was written that they could use the current generator, relocate it, rehook it up, all that kind of stuff. That would be included in the total base bid. But if for some reason there was issues and they needed to bring a generator in, we requested that they provide us a cost for that, a price. You know, when we went out there for a pre-bid meeting, I think just about all of them had issues with using the existing one. Not saying that they could or couldn't, but it sounded like they didn't really want to. But so anyway, my recommendation was to pay an extra $2,900 on our total base bid, but the alternative of renting a generator was a lot cheaper for the, I'll call the higher bidder, because he gave us weekly and monthly rates, where the low bidder gave us a lump sum bid. So, you know, if we used it for a day or 3 months, it would be the same price versus we have, you know, if we use it for a week, it'd be one price or a month. And so it's going to be a more true cost for the project. So I made a recommendation for the higher bidder with the lower alternative.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Mears in regards to the generator replacement? If not, I'll accept a motion.
All right, now, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, I will make a motion to award the bid for the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department emergency generator replacement to Barnes Electric Incorporated in the amount of $189,100, and to authorize additional funds to be expanded to install a temporary generator as needed to provide temporary power during construction as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Councilman Henderson, I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Any questions on the motion? Now we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Mears. I appreciate it. All right. Do we have any old business?
We do not, sir.
Reminder of meetings.
Just one, winter hours for City Hall and utility divisions will begin October 3rd. That's when we go back to 8 to 5.
Okay, great. We'll go to committee reports. Start off with Administration IT, Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The following meetings were attended by staff. They met with several contractors at the fire department and provided access to the electrical room and generator compound for the upcoming bid. They got 2 bids out of it. They attended the Board of Adjustment meeting. They attended the DMEC board meeting and executive committee meeting. They participated in a meeting with Royal Farms, the police department, and the methadone clinic. They They met to talk about, to set a few goals. They are going to have better communication between the police department, Royal Farms, and the methadone clinic. There was talks about if patients are involved in illegal activities across the street, they would discontinue services to people who are creating problems. There was also a person that's in charge of Royal Farms operations. They drove down from Baltimore, and they signed an agreement with the police department to so that they don't need to call the police to go enforce loitering or other problems that are in there. So we have that signed there. And a couple other things that they've done to address the problem at Royal Farms is they've changed managers, and they've removed landscaping that where people were sometimes loitering. Other work from city was they worked on department page issues. They attended a design meeting regarding the WSBC. They participated in an interview to hire a part-time police officer, and they attended the Seaford homecoming parade. For the IT report, they are continuing to work on the fiber rework and integration. They are waiting on insurance on some information, and they are working on splicing the and they need to splice in addition pairs at the Lowe's Tower and Industrial Tower. Thank you so much. They are working on firewall configuration for the command vehicle. They are, for the administration report or finance, they are working on the fiscal year 2022 audit. They are expecting to have the final field work done in October or commenced, and all other business is routine.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, Police and Fire, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to keep this brief. My voice is a little tender. I have a report from Chief John Wilson of the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department. The average calls per day for 2022 is 2.7. September calls are averaging 2.5 calls per day. EMS, there's an average calls of 10.9 calls per day for the year, and an average call of 11.1 calls per day for September so far. The total department responses are 13.7 calls per day for the year. There were a couple significant incidents that were mutual aid. One in Laurel for a large crop fire on Mount Pleasant Road, and one in Bridgeville for a working structure fire on Sunnyside Road. Apparatus status, ambulance B87 is out of service for a vibration in the front end. Tower 87 completed its annual aerial testing in compliance with NFPA 1911. It failed in one area with minor area in hydraulic adjustment, but that's it's going to be repaired, and they're going to meet with the inspector for compliance and certification. There was rapid intervention training on the Denver drill on September 21st, and the next training is October 19th at Delaware State Fire School in Georgetown. Under emergency medical services, we had a recent resignation, and we have new career employee training, and that orientation begins for firefighter EMT Aiden Gregg, firefighter EMT Philip Martin, and firefighter Troy Christensen. Troy continues a tradition of public service, as you might note that he is Dover Mayor Christensen's grandson, and his father is also active in community affairs as well. So he's continuing that long tradition. The training that's going to take place is 5 days, and they'll be assigned to new shifts on Monday, October 3rd. You'll see that in news and events that the fire department's been very active. And once again, Seaford will be represented at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland on October 8th and 9th, where the nation will mourn the loss of 215 American firefighters in the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial for 2021. One of them includes a line of duty loss from Selbyville, Delaware. The Seaford Police Department, you'll see the columns with total complaints and all crimes and the distribution and a comparison with years prior. You'll see some crime view statistics with a few charts. There were, in additional crime data below, you'll see that there were a total of 24 complaints consisting of assault, burglary, fraud, kidnapping, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and weapons. There were 8 felony and 16 misdemeanors. That excludes shoplifting, and there's a 29% clearance rate, which you'll notice. You might notice if you compared this report with the previous report that that's down a little bit, but still in the acceptable range. Most of these incidents in the 24 complaints occurred on Friday between 2 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. I'll move on down to drug complaints. There were 13 total drug complaints, 1 overdose. In traffic, there were 261 traffic contacts, resulting in 63 citations and 11 warnings. There was 1 DUI, 21 crashes, 2 injury accidents, and 3 hit-and-run accidents. And only there was 1 alcohol-related, but not a DUI. The CID, Criminal Investigation Division, is investigating multiple stolen and recovered stolen vehicles involving the same group of suspects. And there is increased activity, and there's some other enforcement activities and collaboration with rural farms to try to address some of the crimes that are occurring there. You'll see that noted a couple of different places. Pardon me. And there is I'll just move on down to events. Upcoming events. There's Community Day these were past events. Community Day at the Miracle Revival Church, Fred Douglass Elementary School Career Day, Seaford High School Homecoming Parade, and Seaford Night Out. That's an upcoming event which will be on October 6th, and the Faith in Blue event on October 8th. That'll be from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And did I hear the chief correctly? That will be at Nutter Park?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Nutter Park. So, I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Code, Parks, and Rec, Councilman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with Parks and Recs. They partnered with Manicoke Watershed Alliance and held a coastal cleanup day around Williams Pond on September 17th. And the areas surrounding Williams Pond include Rockman's Park, Fred Douglass Elementary, Tidal Health, and adjoining roadways, and a total of 48 volunteers, including Watson Marlowe Flow Incorporated and Seaford High School FFA groups, helped clean up. and 335 pounds of trash were removed. And they managed concession stands for both youth flag football and youth soccer programs. And they created a barrier to eliminate people from parking in the library grass lot. And they met with Seaford School District to discuss the upcoming youth basketball season for 9/13. And as a reminder, community tree planting event at Kiwanis Park on Thursday, September 29, beginning at 9:30, and I have some slides. And the red X's that you see are existing trees to be removed. The yellow X's are existing shrubs to be removed. And that will conclude my report for Parks and Recs. We'll switch over to code. 1,652 rental license has been issued out of 1,674 total units. Rental inspections are being scheduled with 295 completed thus far. And Building 3 in completion stages at East Park Business Center, and all the work is routine. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Electric, Councilman McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report has been submitted in its entirety. I'll run through a few highlights. Since the last report, they have finished cutting down the trees in Kiwanis Park. They pulled up the slack in the primary wire on Fallon Drive. And 4 employees went to the DMEC Tool and Truck Expo. Regarding our director, he had a standard director's meeting, council liaison meeting, and staff meeting, and also attended a DMEC annual meeting in Smyrna. Over the next few weeks, they're going to have their annual DP&L transmission meeting, continue to work in the WSBC, and continue working in Bel Air multifamily. And a few highlights off the report. Quick shout out to the Parks and Rec Department. Always good to see on Saturday mornings how many good things are happening out in the parks. Soccer program is going well. There's just filled every Saturday morning from about 8:30 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's good to see. And you guys mentioned the homecoming parade. Always fun to walk that with you gentlemen. Always have a blast in the city. So that's been my report.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Public Works Wastewater Treatment, Councilman King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. My report has been submitted in its entirety. With that being said, I'm just going to hit some highlights from each department. I'll start with the Public Works Department. The Route 13 sewer main project and the South Conwell Green Infrastructure project is nearing completion. The team has been working on cleaning up key sewers, and they also replaced the water service on 3rd Street. Work has been done on the Manor House lift station, and curb painting continues throughout our city. As we saw tonight, the director received the bids for the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department generator, and are moving forward with that project. I will jump over to the wastewater treatment facility. All is operating well, and the plant performance remains good. The director prepared and advertised the bids for a new front-end loader and roof for the compost building. Work is going on at the Virginia Commons lift station. And here's just a few of the projects that's going to be happening over the next couple weeks. They will continue to paint curbs, keep the plant up and running with 0 violations, lift station cleaning, getting the leaf machine ready, and repair cleanouts on the smoke testing list. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much. The city is currently involved in preliminary discussions and negotiations regarding a site acquisition for a publicly funded sale of land. We included an item on the agenda for an executive session to discuss these preliminary negotiations. So with that, I'll accept a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion from Councilman McCoy, is there a second?
Councilman Henderson, I second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, case unanimous. Thank you.